After calling it a witch hunt for months, for the first time, United States President Donald Trump appears to acknowledge Russia's efforts to meddle in the 2016 presidential election, blames Barack Obama for doing nothing. Prime Minister Narendra Modi reaches Portugal as part of his three-nation tour starting today. Modi will hold talks with Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Costa. He is also likely to interact with the Indian community in the country. PM Modi will also visit the United States and the Netherlands. Writing on his Facebook page, Prime Minister Modi informed his well-wishers and readers that he will be visiting Washington between the 24th and the 26th of June at the invitation of President Donald J. Trump. The Prime Minister's last stop will be in the Netherlands, where he seeks to boost bilateral ties and deepen economic cooperation between the two nations. Prime Minister Modi's visit to Portugal is actually the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Portugal. You will remember that Portugal was a colonial power in Goa, in Daman and Diu, and all the three parts of India were liberated by Indian troops in 1961. Prime Minister Modi hopes to forge a new strategic relationship with the European country, Portugal, and hopes to therewith counter the effect or the efforts made by China, which is hoping to establish a new route to improve its connectivity and also to spread its sphere of strategic influence in Europe. This is a new Atlantic route. Analysts have written about it and noted that there was pressure upon Portugal even during the recent Belt and Road Initiative in China to desist from joining the European Union statement against the Belt and Road Initiative. Remember that Portugal, Greece and Spain Portugal was one of the three countries, the other two were Greece and Spain, that suffered particularly during the recession, the Euro crisis. So there is greater pressure on those countries on part of China to join their connectivity initiatives. But Prime Minister Modi's visit may change all that. And I will also remind viewers of the earlier visit in January by the Portuguese Prime Minister Costa to India. You will remember that Prime Minister Costa is of Indian Goan origin. It is the first time that Portugal has a Prime Minister of Indian origin. And we are getting visuals of the Prime Minister's arrival in Portugal. As you can see, the plane has landed, the Air India jet, the special jet carrying the Prime Minister and his entourage. And any minute now, Prime Minister Modi will step out of that door and set foot for the first time ever for an Indian Prime Minister on Portuguese soil. Portugal was a colonizing power and a major naval power in the 17th century. And there we have it. There is Prime Minister Narendra Modi arriving on the first leg of his three-nation tour in Portugal. And it's various officials receiving him. There is he's getting some salutes and some a namaste even from a lady in a sari. This might be, of course, these might be members of the local Indian diplomatic staff. I can well imagine that the Indian ambassador to Portugal would also be present at the airport. Yeah. Joining me now to discuss Prime Minister's three-nation visit and his arrival in Portugal, you can see he's shaking hands there with various people as he embarked in New Delhi, is my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran, senior correspondent. Ramesh, this is for the first time that an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Portugal. And, given that there are ancient ties between, historical ties and colonial ties, links between the two countries, what do you make of that? Why is this the first visit ever?
Right, Padma. So essentially from India's perspective, we've seen a pattern emerging in Prime Minister Modi's foreign visit starting from 2014 when he came to power. And that is that every time he travels to a country for a high-level visit, tries to accommodate more countries either around, nearby the countries visiting or on the way. Now, we know that the Prime Minister generally when they travel to North America, stop over in Germany, in Frankfurt or other countries. But we've seen Prime Minister Modi make it a point to visit more countries than usual for Indian Prime Ministers. And Portugal visit should be seen in that context. His visit is in the first leg of his three-nation tour to the US and later to the Netherlands. But that said, bilaterally, it's an important visit for India. Remember, Portugal is a member still of the EU, and the Prime Minister of Portugal, Antonio Costa, who is of Indian origin, was in India recently, a few months ago. So within a span of 5 to 6 months, we've seen another high-level visit between Portugal and India, and that should signify that speaks for itself. Padma?
What do you make of the chemistry between the two leaders, Ramesh? Because I'm sure you watched that visit by Prime Minister Costa to India in January very closely. What did you make of, when Prime Minister Costa gave Prime Minister Modi a Cristiano Ronaldo jersey, and there seemed to be a very good chemistry between the two leaders?
Indeed, Prime Minister Modi is one head of government who invests a great deal of time, energy and effort in trying to establish a personal rapport with heads of government or state. And he invests a great deal of time and energy in establishing or pursuing what is called as personalized diplomacy. We've seen that with many heads of state around the world, including the President of the USA, President Trump, and before that, President Obama. And the same argument holds true for even Prime Minister Costa of Portugal. They have met before, and India and Portugal share a robust relationship bilaterally, regionally, and at a global level. We have Portugal and India have a rich cultural heritage and common traditions. Remember, they have a colonial past as well, so a lot of cultural affinities, economic priorities, and imperatives that drive this relationship.
Would you say, Ramesh, that there is any bitterness left? Because if you remember in 1961, when Indian troops marched into Goa, Daman and Diu, there was a certain amount of bitterness, and it was seen as an annexation rather, or an invasion rather than a liberation. Would you say that the past so many decades have wiped out that bitterness, or would you say that there is much work to be done there by Prime Minister Modi on this visit?
Padma, to borrow a phrase used by Prime Minister Modi in another context, but it is apt to quote in the context of India-Portugal relation, and that is that India and Portugal have overcome the hesitations of the past, and now the only way for the bilateral ties to grow is to go up and up. So clearly, both sides have put the past behind them, and they're looking forward to deepen and broaden their strategic partnership in terms of trade and investments, in terms of Portugal being a gateway, as it were, for Indian investments into the European Union market. So clearly, a lot of complementarities here that drive this economic partnership between India and Portugal.
Ramesh, you would have seen, do stay with us. We've just got some visuals coming in of the Prime Minister's departure and now arrival in Portugal. Does it ever strike you, Ramesh, this is a Prime Minister who seems to have an incredible amount of energy? Would you be able to take on a tour like this? 3 nations in barely 5 days.
Padma, that is, what is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's strength is also to some people his handicap. Remember, in the first 2 years of his prime ministership, he traveled far and wide, and he made it a point to establish a personal rapport and meeting with as many heads of state and government as he possibly could. But that also went against him with many domestically in the Indian political establishment and political parties, accusing him of spending spending a disproportionate time abroad than at home. So we've seen a nuanced shift, as it were, in Prime Minister Modi's travels, with him focusing on becoming choosy in where he visits and how frequently he does. Remember, Prime Minister Modi and President Obama had met at least on 8 occasions in the less than 2 years that they were in office. So clearly, we've seen a quantum jump in terms of India's engagements with countries of the world. But in the last year or so, we've seen Prime Minister Modi cut down his frequent visits abroad and trying to consolidate his position or his engagements at home, domestically speaking. But at the same time, as Prime Minister of the country, of the largest of the rising power, he has to attend to diplomatic engagements and events around the world. And the current three-leg visit, the three-nation visit, should be seen in that context.
Ramesh, I'm going to keep you on with us a little while longer. Would you say, since you're someone who watches foreign policy and India's Foreign Office, regularly, would you say that all these travels that you mentioned that came under heavy criticism initially, that they've paid off as far as India's foreign policy and India's engagement with many other countries is concerned?
Indeed, very true. I mean, we've seen the geopolitical or the geopolitics in a state of flux, as it were, around the world, with constant shifting of the balance of power, as it were, with many more countries rising and developing economically and militarily. So clearly, India is seeking to diversify its bilateral engagements, not only with the five permanent members of the UN Security Council, but also other members especially in the European Union, who are of close partners of India economically, in terms of trade and investments, and also for the foreign direct investment into India. So clearly, the focus remains very much on trade and investment, and how India wanting to diversify its economic basket as it were to more countries than the usual.
Right. Thank you very much, Ramesh Ramachandran, for joining us on this show. We now have more news, and we're going to look a little ahead towards Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit. After Portugal, he will travel to the United States. Now, many are expecting Prime Minister Modi to discuss the issue of immigration with US President Donald Trump. WION's Archit Seshadri, who is on the ground for WION in Washington and who will be giving us extensive reports from the ground. He sends you this one from Washington, D.C.
Here in the streets of Washington, D.C., things have been a little different over the last 6 months. This because of a new man in the White House, a man who doesn't have the political experience, someone who's used to running a business. So how exactly are Indian Americans dealing under a Trump America? Well, this certainly could be addressed when Narendra Modi meets Donald Trump face-to-face on Monday for the first time. So how exactly are they going to quell fears about an anti-immigrant stance, about making sure that no one is left out? In fact, earlier this year, there was a lot of fear about anti-crimes and anti-hate after an Indian was shot and killed in Kansas, Srinivas Kuchibhotla. So that is a big question, a big worry for many people who say they're not sure. There's a little bit of anxiety there about how migrants and minorities will be treated here for the next 4 years, and how exactly will they be able to chase their American dream. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Archit Seshadri, WION.